I got my career, everything that I worked for all my life. I finally see that I've finally succeeded in throwing it away.
Hard work and talent have been the bedrock of country music over the years, but not anymore. Even the hardest working, most talented country music stars still struggle to be in the spotlight. What has been the reason for that? Join us as we expose 25 country stars who deserve more fame. Number 25, Carl Smith. In the early 1950s, Carl Smith was one of the brightest stars in country music. What set Smith apart was his unique ability. He could sing hard-driving honky-tonk, tender ballads with a Western swing flair. He was also good-looking and often compared to Hollywood movie stars. For a time, he was one of Columbia's top-selling artists, rivaling Hank Williams in popularity. But despite his success, Smith's legacy faded quickly in later decades. Part of this was the emergence of the Nashville sound in the late 1950s. Smith's straightforward honky-tonk style began to feel old-fashioned to record executives. While other artists adapted to the smoother style, Smith stuck closer to his roots, which limited his mainstream visibility. Still, Smith's career was impressive. He scored over 10 top hits throughout the 1950s and remained a Grand Ole Opry favorite. He later hosted his own TV show and continued performing into the 1970s, though his name had slipped mainly from the spotlight. Carl Smith deserved more fame than he ultimately received. Number 24, Mel Street. With his aching voice, a natural feel for honky-tonk, and songs that spoke straight to the heart of working-class listeners, Mel Street had all the makings of a country superstar. Street's first taste of success came in the early 1970s with the song Borrowed Angel. The song resonated deeply and became his signature hit. Sadly, behind the music, Mel Street wrestled with crippling depression and alcoholism. The recognition and fame didn't ease his inner struggles. On 21st October 1978, which was his 45th birthday, Mel Street took his own life. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the country music community. After his demise, several of his recordings were released posthumously. His peers mourned him, with George Jones noting how much Street's voice reminded him of his own. But without Street alive to continue building momentum, his legacy quickly faded into the background of country history. Mel Street deserved far more fame than he ever received. Number 23, Keith Whitley. Keith Whitley remains one of country music's most beloved stars. He transitioned into mainstream country in the 1980s, and his album Don't Close Your Eyes produced 3 number-1 hits instantly. Despite all these successes, Whitley was battling with alcoholism, which shadowed his success. His supportive wife and fellow country stars put in the effort to make him quit his addiction, but Whitley couldn't until his addiction brought him to his fatal end. Keith Whitley passed away from alcohol poisoning on May 1989 at just 34 years old. His demise cut short a career that many believed could have reshaped the direction of country music. Number 22, Dottie West. Dottie West was among the first women in country music to break barriers, yet history often places her in the shadows of her contemporaries. Her big break came in 1964 with Here Comes My Baby, a song that earned her the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance, the first ever Grammy given to a female country artist. This achievement should have earned her a permanent place as a pioneer, but her fame never soared to the heights of her peers. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, West's career flourished in partnerships. But contrary to what was expected, this partnership's success relegated her to a duet partner rather than the solo star she could have been. In addition to this, financial struggles plagued her later years, forcing her to sell possessions and leaving her in debt. Tragically, Dottie West's life ended in 1991 after a car accident on her way to perform at the Opry. She was only 58. In 2018, nearly 3 decades after her demise, she was finally inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Number 21, Joe Diffie. If one voice defined the humor, charm, and working-class heart of the 90s country, it was Joe Diffie's. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1958, Diffie worked blue-collar jobs before landing a recording contract in Nashville. He hit the mainstream in the early 90s with hits like Pickup Man, John Deere Green, and Third Rock from the Sun. Diffie also delivered some of the most emotional ballads of the decade, such as If the Devil Danced and Ships That Don't Come In. His ability to move seamlessly from humor to heartbreak was a rare gift. Despite his 5 number-1 singles and multiple top 10s, Diffie never became as iconic as peers like Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, or George Strait. As country radio shifted in the 2000s toward a younger, pop-influenced sound, his hits faded from playlists. His career came into the spotlight again briefly when Jason Aldean referenced him in the 2013 hit, chanting, "Joe Diffie." The tribute reintroduced him to a younger audience, showing his influence on modern country artists. Tragically, Joe Diffie passed away in March 2020 from complications related to COVID-19. Joe Diffie may not have reached the superstar heights of his peers, but his music remains timeless. Number 20, Johnny Paycheck. Johnny Paycheck started his career as a sideman, playing bass and singing harmony for George Jones in the 1960s, but Paycheck had ambitions of his own. By the late 60s, he began recording solo, releasing hits with songs like "She's All I Got" and "Someone to Give My Love To." His breakthrough came in 1977 with "Take This Job and Shove It." The song became #1 on the country charts and part of everyday American speech, but fame didn't come easy. Behind the hits, Paycheck battled alcoholism, drug addiction, and run-ins with the law. His reputation for being unpredictable and rebellious kept him in the headlines for the wrong reasons. Unfortunately, Paycheck never achieved the sustained mainstream success of his outlaw peers due to timing and his self-destructive behavior. His career slowed drastically in the 1990s, though hardcore fans still loved him. When he passed away in 2003, it became apparent that the 1950s country listeners didn't realize how influential he had been. Number 19, David Allan Coe. David Allan Coe is country music's most complicated and controversial figure. Coe first gained recognition in the early 1970s as a songwriter. His most significant contribution to country history may be the hits he penned for others, including "Take This Job and Shove It," written for Johnny Paycheck, which became a working-class anthem. He also wrote many other hits for top stars. As a performer, Coe carved out his own path. His albums mixed traditional country with blues, rock, and even spoken storytelling. Yet, despite his undeniable influence, Coe never entirely broke into mainstream stardom. His reputation often overshadowed his music, and some of his independent recordings were too controversial and explicit for mainstream recognition. His live shows were unpredictable. Sometimes they were soulful performances, while others were a mix of rough-edged humor. As the years went by, Coe's legacy became even more complicated. David Allan Coe may never have been a superstar, but he was a true outlaw. Number 18, T. Graham Brown. T. Graham Brown's career took off in the mid-1980s when he signed with Capitol Records. At the peak of his career, Brown scored 3 #1 singles and several top 10 hits, becoming a recognizable voice on the radio. Yet despite his talent, Brown never reached the superstar heights of other 80s artists. Part of the reason was the new traditionalist movement. The latest country was emphasizing a return to hardcore honky-tonk and pushing aside artists with a more soulful, genre-blending sound. Personal struggles also derailed his career. Brown was battling alcoholism, which affected his work and visibility in the industry. Radio moved on, and Brown slipped out of the spotlight. However, he never completely disappeared. In later years, he found stability, became an outspoken advocate for recovery, and returned to recording gospel and country albums. Looking back, T. Graham Brown deserved far more recognition than he received. Number 17, Jean Shepard. Jean Shepard was one of the earliest women to break ground in country music, yet her name is often left out when people list the great female pioneers. Her breakthrough came in 1953 with the duet "A Dear John Letter," recorded with Ferlin Husky. The song was a massive success, reaching #1 on the country charts and even crossing into the pop world. This hit should have launched Shepard into long-term superstardom, but the industry was slow to embrace women in lead roles fully. Still, she carved out a steady career, releasing hits through the 1950s and 60s. Shepard joined the Opry in 1955 and remained a member for over 6 decades. But despite her talent, longevity, and trailblazing influence, Shepard never reached superstar heights like most of her peers. Offstage, Shepard was known for her strong will and outspoken personality. She didn't hesitate to criticize the industry when she felt it was moving too far from its roots. That boldness may have cost her some opportunities, but it also solidified her reputation as a no-nonsense defender of classic country. Number 16, John Anderson. John Anderson is one of those artists who stood out in every era he touched, yet somehow never achieved the lasting recognition of the country's biggest icons. His first breakthrough came in the early 1980s with a string of hits. His 1983 single "Swingin'" became his signature song, earning him a CMA Award for Single of the Year. Despite these successes, Anderson never entirely broke into country superstardom. One reason may be that Anderson resisted chasing trends. This authenticity may have cost him the mass market push that others received. Even so, Anderson's influence is undeniable. His swampy, roots-driven style opened the door for later artists like Blake Shelton and Chris Stapleton, who cited Anderson's authenticity as an inspiration. Today, Anderson continues to perform and has been celebrated in recent years with tributes from younger stars who recognize the road he paved. Number 15. Linda Martell. Linda Martell's name should be etched alongside the country's greatest pioneers, but she remains one of its most forgotten. Martell made history in 1968 when she became the first African-American woman to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. At a time when race relations in America were strained, Nashville's music industry was deeply segregated. But Martell's career was cut short because of systemic racism and industry barriers. Radio stations often refused to play her songs simply because she was black, promoters overlooked her, and Nashville executives gave her little support after her initial success. Frustrated and disillusioned, Martell stepped away from the country spotlight in the early 1970s. She continued to sing gospel and perform locally, but her chance at long-term country stardom had been stolen. It wasn't until recent years that Linda Martell's legacy began to receive the recognition it deserves. Linda Martell deserved far more fame for the courage it took to step onto the Opry stage and sing in a world that didn't welcome her. Number 14. Gene Watson. When country fans talk about pure, golden voices, Gene Watson's name almost always comes up. Born in 1943 in Palestine, Texas, Watson grew up singing in church and at local gatherings before working odd jobs and playing music on the side. Watson first found national attention in 1975 with the hit Love in the Hot Afternoon. The sultry ballad, full of imagery and passion, immediately set him apart from other country singers of the era. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, Watson enjoyed a string of hits, including Farewell Party. Despite his immense talent, Watson never achieved the superstar status of his peers. He was admired, even revered, but never fully marketed as a household name. Even though his mainstream fame dimmed, Watson never stopped working. He continued recording albums. In 2020, he was invited to join the Grand Ole Opry, a long overdue honor that gave him a legacy in the country world. Gene Watson may not have become a household name like some of his contemporaries, but his voice is one of the most beautiful in country music history. Number 13. Holly Dunn. Holly Dunn's name may not echo as loudly today as some of her 1980s contemporaries, but for a time, she was one of country music's most beloved female voices. Dunn began her career as a songwriter in Nashville before stepping into the spotlight herself. By the mid-1980s, she secured a recording contract and released her debut single, Daddy's Hands. It was a tribute written to her father. The song became her signature hit, climbing into the top 10 and earning Grammy nominations. Dunn enjoyed steady success, following that breakthrough throughout the 80s and early 90s. She won the Academy of Country Music's Top New Female Vocalist Award in 1986, solidifying her place among the rising stars of the decade. However, as country music shifted in the 1990s toward modern tunes, Dunn's more understated style began to fade from mainstream radio. Rather than fight for a place in the evolving industry, she retired from music altogether by the early 2000s and pursued visual art. She passed away at just 59 years old. Today, Holly Dunn is rarely mentioned in the broader conversation of country music history, yet her contributions were meaningful. Number 12. Gary Stewart. Gary Stewart's name doesn't ring out in today's country conversations as loudly as it should, yet in the 1970s, he was one of the most distinctive voices and stylists in the genre. Stewart's breakthrough came in 1974 with Out of Hand, an album that shook up Nashville. What set Stewart apart was his ability to merge rugged country storytelling with the energy of rock. Stewart stayed raw, while his contemporaries leaned into smooth Nashville polish, and fans loved him for it. Despite all these, fame never fully caught up with his talent. This was partly because of Stewart's own struggles. He battled alcoholism and substance use for much of his life, which often derailed his momentum. His erratic lifestyle sometimes overshadowed his artistry. Still, fans and fellow musicians considered him one of the most authentic performers of his era. Tragically, Stewart's life ended in 2003 at the age of 59. He took his own life shortly after his wife passed. Stewart may not have become a household name, but to those who know his music, he remains unforgettable. Number 11. Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson may not be the first name people consider when recalling country music's golden era. Still, in the 1950s and 60s, he was a steady hitmaker and one of the Grand Ole Opry's most reliable stars. Jackson's biggest hit, Waterloo, went to #1 on the country charts, and even crossed into the pop top 5. Its success instantly made Jackson a household name and showed his knack for connecting with listeners through catchy, story-driven songs. Yet despite his success, Jackson was overshadowed by larger-than-life stars of his era. He also struggled later in life with declining visibility as country music's focus shifted toward more polished, modern sounds. In 2006, Jackson made headlines when he sued the Grand Ole Opry for age discrimination, claiming he had been sidelined due to younger acts taking priority. While the case was eventually settled, it didn't give him the desired star power. Stonewall Jackson passed away in 2021 at the age of 89, leaving behind a classic country catalog that still resonates with traditionalists. Though he never became a global superstar, he embodied the hardworking spirit of classic country. Number 10. Lacey J. Dalton. Lacey J. Dalton had one of the most distinctive voices in country music. Born Jill Byram in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania in 1946, she came to Nashville in the late 1970s. She quickly stood out in a sea of polished country pop singers. Her breakthrough came in 1979 with Crazy Blue Eyes. It introduced her as a fresh, unconventional voice in the genre. Over the next several years, Dalton delivered a string of chart successes. Dalton's style wasn't easily boxed in. She was part outlaw, part folk, part traditionalist, and part contemporary. Despite her talent, Dalton never quite broke through to the superstar level. The 1980s country scene increasingly leaned toward big production, glamorous imagery, and crossover appeal. As a result, she remained a respected figure, but never received the same spotlight or long-term radio dominance. Outside of her chart career, Dalton was known for her dedication to social causes, especially animal welfare. Today, Dalton is remembered as a true artist. Number 9. Vern Gosdin. Few singers in country music history could deliver a lyric with as much soul and conviction as Vern Gosdin. Known simply as The Voice, Gosdin possessed a warm, mournful baritone that carried an almost spiritual weight. Born in Woodland, Alabama in 1934, he grew up singing gospel with his family before venturing into country music. He started with the Gosdin Brothers, a duo with his sibling, and even worked alongside Chris Hillman of the Byrds. But in the 1970s and 80s, Gosdin truly found his calling as a solo country artist. By the mid-1980s, he was charting hits that became country music standards. What set Gosdin apart was how he made listeners feel he was speaking directly to their struggles. Despite his immense talent, Gosdin never rose to mainstream superstardom. Part of the reason was that the Nashville industry focused on younger, more commercially marketable acts. Another factor was Gosdin's independence. He wasn't one to chase trends or soften his sound for radio. He stayed true to traditional country, which endeared him to purists but limited his broader exposure. Number 8. Wynn Stewart. When people talk about the Bakersfield sound, names like Buck Owens and Merle Haggard dominate the conversation. Long before either became household names, Wynn Stewart laid the groundwork for that West Coast country sound. Born in 1934 in Morrisville, Missouri, and raised partly in California, Stewart grew up surrounded by music and was already performing in his teens. His early recordings in the 1950s blended honky-tonk roots with a fresh, driving energy. Stewart's influence on country music is often understated but cannot be denied. Despite his groundbreaking role, Stewart struggled with consistency in the charts. He usually bounced between record labels, and while his music resonated with hardcore fans, he didn't always enjoy the promotion that bigger stars received. Still, he managed several career highlights, including the 1967 #1 hit, It's Such a Pretty World Today, which remains his signature song. Sadly, like many talented artists, Stewart's career was cut short. He passed away in 1985 at just 51 years old from a heart attack. His demise came when he might have enjoyed a spark in his career. Although he faded too quickly, there's no doubt that he made a mark in country music. Number 7. Connie Smith. Fellow musicians have long regarded Connie Smith as one of the finest vocalists in country music history, yet her name doesn't always come up alongside the genre giants. Born in 1941 in Elkhart, Indiana, and raised in Ohio, Smith rose to fame in the mid-1960s with a voice so rich, soaring, and full of emotion. Her breakout came in 1964 with her debut single, Once a Day, written by Bill Anderson. The song skyrocketed to #1 on the Billboard country chart and stayed there for 8 weeks. She held that record for nearly 50 years. Over the next decade, Connie Smith consistently appeared on the charts, hitting almost top 10 hits. Despite this impressive record, she never became a household name. Part of this may be due to her decision to step back from the spotlight at the peak of her fame to prioritize her family and faith. She slowed down her momentum during a critical period when country music expanded into the mainstream. Because of that, her artistry never went unnoticed among peers. Later in life, Smith's career received a spark when she married Marty Stewart, who was deeply dedicated to preserving her legacy. With his encouragement, she returned to recording and performing, earning new recognition from younger generations of fans and critics. In 2012, her impact was formally acknowledged with her induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Despite these accolades, Connie Smith's name still doesn't circulate in popular culture as it should, but for those who know her work, Connie Smith remains one of the country's most treasured and underappreciated gems. Number 6. Mo Bandy. In an era when country music was beginning to flirt with pop crossovers, Mo Bandy stood tall as one of the purest honky-tonk voices of the 1970s and early 80s. Born in Meridian, Mississippi in 1944 and raised in Texas, Bandy worked as a sheet metal worker and rodeo cowboy before becoming a musician. His breakthrough came in the mid-1970s with "I Just Started Hatin' Cheatin' Songs Today." Throughout the 70s and 80s, Bandy scored hit after hit. But despite his steady string of hits and his undeniable role in keeping traditional honky-tonk alive, Mo Bandy never quite reached superstar status. His music appealed strongly to hardcore country fans, but didn't cross over into pop or mainstream radio in the way some others managed. As a result, his contributions often get overlooked in retrospectives of the era. Yet his songs remain staples in classic country playlists, and his influence can be heard in modern traditionalists. Number 5. Billie Joe Spears. Billie Joe Spears was one of those rare artists in country music. She made her way to Nashville in the 1960s, but like many artists, her early years were filled with struggles. Her career finally broke wide open in 1957 with the release of Blanket on the Ground. It shot to number 1 on the Billboard country chart and even crossed internationally, making Spears a star in the UK and Ireland. Following that, Spears recorded a string of hits that kept her on the charts throughout the late 70s. However, she was so devoted internationally that she never realized when she was losing local recognition. She didn't top the US charts, but was adored abroad, proving her universal appeal. Still, her contributions were significant. With over 30 charting singles and a decades-long career, Spears paved the way for mature storytelling in country music, proving that songs about real women and their experiences could resonate with mass audiences. Number 4. Freddie Hart. Born Frederick Segrest in 1926 in Alabama, Hart came from a large sharecropping family and grew up in poverty during the Great Depression. Like many Southern boys of his generation, he found solace in music. By age 5, he was already picking out tunes on a guitar, and by his teens, music was clearly his destiny. Hart was first recognized not as a singer, but as a songwriter. His early material was recorded by giants like Patsy Cline, Carl Smith, and Porter Wagoner. For years, Hart released singles that failed to gain much traction, leading some to dismiss him as a songwriter. That perception changed dramatically in 1971 with the release of Easy Loving. The song hit number 1 on the country charts and won the Country Music Association Song of the Year for 2 years. The success of Easy Loving propelled Hart into the spotlight. Yet despite this burst of fame, Hart never reached the lasting superstar status. The rise of the outlaw movement and changing tastes left Hart somewhat stranded between eras. Still, Hart's impact shouldn't be underestimated. Freddie Hart may not always be the first name mentioned in the country's golden era, but his legacy endures in the sincerity of his music. Number 3. Lefty Frizzell. Lefty Frizzell is one of the iconic country music stars of the 50s. By the late 1940s, Lefty was honing his craft in Texas honky-tonks and radio shows. In 1950, he broke through with a string of hits that reshaped the sound of country. Lefty was the artist who changed how country music should be sung. Without Lefty, the sound of modern country would not exist in the form we know today. Despite his massive influence, Lefty's career trajectory was troubled. He struggled with alcohol, which often led to erratic behavior and strained relationships within the industry. By the late 50s, his star had dimmed, even as younger singers borrowed heavily from his style. Lefty's life was tragically cut short in 1975 at just 47 years old. He passed from complications of high blood pressure, leaving behind a legacy that would only grow in hindsight. While his name might not be as instantly recognized by casual country fans today, he is revered as a pioneer. Number 2. Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith's name may not be as instantly recognized today, But in the early 1970s, she delivered one of the most groundbreaking performances in country history. Her defining moment came with her 1970 recording of Chris Christopherson's "Help Me Make It Through the Night." The record shot to #1 on the country charts, crossed over to the Pop Top 10, and earned Smith both a Grammy and a Country Music Association award. For a brief moment, she was one of the hottest names in music. She didn't chase commercial trends or polish her sound to fit Nashville's mold. While this gave her credibility, it also meant fewer mainstream radio hits. Her career dimmed too quickly, but Sammy Smith's influence can still be felt. She opened the door for female artists to sing beautifully about love, desire, and vulnerability without apologizing. Sammy Smith may not have held the spotlight long, but she burned brightly quickly. #1. Leona Williams. Leona Williams is one of country music's most underrated treasures. Her big break came when she joined Loretta Lynn's band as a bass player and backing vocalist. From there, her songwriting caught the attention of major stars. Williams penned songs for George Jones, Loretta Lynn, and Tammy Wynette. Williams joined Merle Haggard's band, The Strangers, in the mid-1970s. Eventually, she became a trusted musical collaborator and also Haggard's wife. Leona did record as a solo artist, releasing albums that showcased her warm, heartfelt voice. However, despite critical acclaim, she never found the consistent radio success that others of her generation enjoyed. The male-dominated industry often pushed her aside, and she never got the sustained promotional support she deserved. After her divorce from Haggard, Williams continued to perform and record, proving her resilience. Leona Williams may not have been a household name, but her fingerprints are all over the country's golden era. What have you learned from these country music stars? Share with us in the comments section and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button and watch other videos on this channel before you leave.